Hey everybody, welcome back to the Metal Mill 52 workshop. My name is Bill. This is my current project. It's a 3.5-inch gauge LBSC Tich locomotive. There's the locomotive in its little stand, and here are all the painted parts. This week's episode, we will cover painting all of the different brass, copper, and steel parts that you see here laid out. It's very interesting. I did some brush work on the inside of the cab. And this is the first time I ever used one of the Rust-Oleum 5-position spray nozzles for spray paint. So it's all sitting in here and drying. My goal is to let this all dry and let the paint cure for a week or two while I work on the final assembly of the boiler. And I hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, just give me a thumbs up. It does motivate me. And if you have any questions, please ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks again for being part of the journey. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I look forward to wrapping this thing up soon. Okay, starting with the final preparation for paint and final assembly. I'm stripping down the chassis. I'm obviously taking the tanks off and the smokestack and so forth. I'm using a little Altoids tin. I'm marking where the rails go, the little handrails and so forth. And got the cab parts over here, the tanks and the cab parts taken off over there. So I'll just continue this process and get it all stripped down to the bare chassis, I'll have a bare boiler and a bare chassis. And my thought is I can work on them both kind of simultaneously, because the paint, to do it right, it's going to take time drying and sanding and stuff in between. And similarly, the boiler, I want to soak it in soapy water, probably put it in the pickle a little bit just to kind of clear everything else out, any residual acids and things, and then hot soapy water again, rinse it out really good, let it dry really good before I start assembling everything. Before I start the painting, I've disassembled everything. Here's the bare chassis, but I realized I hadn't gotten the 1/4 inch inside diameter tubing, so I went to the auto parts store today and I got this nice vacuum tubing. It's pretty thick and it fits on there real nice. So the other thing I realized is I had not leak tested these tanks. So I've got some water in a bottle here. I was just getting ready to hold my finger over it, and I've got the other end up. So we'll test the leak integrity of the tank. I'll do it for both sides, but I'm going to do this one first. I'll have to put the phone down while I fill it up with the water bottle, but I'll bring you back in a second and we'll see what that looks like. Okay, well, I'm glad I did the leak test, because basically the tank is fine except for along the front edge there. This is the right hand tank. You can see there's a profound little drippage, and it flows fine out of the bottom fitting there, but not a big deal. I can take the top off and let everything dry out, and I'll go back in and put some of that POR 15 sealer. Well, this is disappointing too. This is the left-hand tank, and there is a leak on the back left side, so I'm glad I checked this all out. I did pump it, and the pump works fine, so that's all good. So just a matter of taking the tops off and sealing along some seams before we get much further. Important thing to check. It's embarrassing to have the leaks, but like I said, I'm glad I found them out now. I held the spots up to the light, and I see exactly where the leaks are, so not a big deal. Tomorrow night, now I'm letting them dry out right now. As you can see, I've taped off some of the stuff to get ready for painting, and I've got the POR patch stuff and some little paint brushes ready to go. So tomorrow night I'll come and seal those out. In the meanwhile, I took all the brass pieces that need to get painted, and I've sanded them lightly, scuffed them with 220 grit sandpaper, and then just wiped them off with acetone and a clean cloth. So now I'm going to move these out of the way, and I'll just have the tanks there that I can focus on for tomorrow. Well, I just got out the pour patch stuff, and I used up some. As you can see here, this is my little work area. I used a plastic bag. I squirted out a bunch of it, and I used a couple of little modeling paintbrushes to spread it around. And I had the leak on this side was inside the front there. I was able to see it really clearly by holding it up to the light, so I just painted over that area. And for this one, it was along the back seam here, so I painted along that seam from the inside, and I went ahead for good measure and painted on the back or the outside portion as well. So now I just let that set up overnight and let it dry, and we can water test them tomorrow. But I wanted to show, like, you definitely want to wear gloves to keep this stuff off your hands, because it dries hard and it is almost impossible to get off. So, but it's great stuff. Highly recommended. It's perfect for stuff like this. I used it on my Allen Mogul on the tender, and it did a wonderful job. It was a lot easier to spread there because I could use my finger with a glove, just kind of like you would use silicone. This is a little trickier since it's a smaller space. But also, as you can see, I did take out the the little runners that hold the top in place on either one of them. So I'm back the night after letting the tanks dry with the additional supply of pour patch in there. I put some little rubber plugs on there, and let's leak test them again. So this one is starboard right hand tank. The leak was coming out of the front portion at the bottom, and it is dry as bone. Yep, perfect, nothing to it. So that is good. I'll cut that off, get the other one set up, and we'll test it too. I swapped them around again. I got the little rubber boot over the left-hand tank now. And the leak, if you recall, it was along this seam here in the back. So I sealed it up good with the POR 15, the pour patch stuff. I actually put a lot more in there than I intended to, but it won't hurt anything. So let's do a little leak test with it now. Halfway filled up. No leaks are visible. I'm going to fill it up all the way. Whoops. Sloppy filling job, but not a leak. Yep. Nice and dry back here. Dry underneath. All good. So yay. Now we can take this apart, or drain the water out. Let it dry, of course, and I'll sand the outside of these things to prepare them for the paint. Here on the side yard, I'm getting ready to spray the the self-etching primer on all of these parts. So I've got them laid out in the sun here, and I'm going to put on 2 or 3 very light coats, and just to get something to adhere the paint to. That's all. My tendency personally, is to always try to put too much on, which is not a good thing, but you can see I've got it all laid out, easy to access. So we'll put 2 to 3 light coats on, and we'll let it dry for a considerable amount of time. Then there's pieces that I have to flip over there. So we'll let that all dry very thoroughly and flip it over maybe in an hour or so when it's okay to handle. Here's the results after the first light coat. You can still see the brass through the spray paint. That's kind of the idea, is just let that. So I've let it sit for about 5 or 6 minutes to tack up, and I'll come back and do another very light coat. You can see I was very light on that side there, so I'll pay attention to that. And then we'll let this dry for quite a while, and then I can flip over the pieces I need to paint the opposite side. Okay, I waited half an hour, brought all the other pieces in, as you can see, and I really did accomplish getting that very light coat on. So now I've flipped all these pieces over. I'll put the mask back on and put 2 light coats on this, and we'll let everything dry overnight. Okay, if I sound funny, it's because I already got my mask on, and I've got all the pieces laid out. So they had 2 good coats of the self-etching primer, and I sanded them down with 500 grit sandpaper last night. I brought them out here, and I used the tack rag on them, and I'm getting ready to put the primer sealer on. So I'll do the same thing, like
2 or 3 very light coats. Let that dry, sand it tonight, and maybe some color tomorrow.
Okay, day 2 of the painting process has gone really well. What you're looking at here is the Rust-Oleum primer sealer, and 2 light coats on all of these parts, and I let them dry for half an hour. Let them dry a few minutes in between coats, and then for half an hour before I moved them and brought them in so they can dry inside the workshop overnight. But I'm really pleased with how that came out. As you can see, it's a much lighter gray color, and it's a little different from the other, and you can tell it's a little bit of a, it'll be sandable for sure, so I'm going to wait at least 4, maybe 5 hours before I sand these at all, and then put the top coat on. Over here you can see the parts that I've painted with the high temperature paint, and I got a little bit on the smoke box, gave me a little bit of fits. The finish didn't take that well, so I'm going to let it dry overnight, and I'll sand it a little bit, clean it carefully, and shoot another top coat on tomorrow. But the door went real well. I primed that first and of course the chimney I did as well. Primed that with the self-etching primer. As I did this part, I'm surprised. I must have got some dirt on the smoke box, but it's not a huge thing, and you can't even see it now, but when I first sprayed it, it looked a little odd. So I'll clean it. You can see it chipped a little on the edge there, so I do need to clean that up and shoot a little bit more. And I'm going to let this sit a long time before I put it all together. That's part of the reason I went ahead and did the painting first, was to let all of this cure for quite some time before I reassemble. We're talking like a week or 2. And over here, there's the running boards with the sealing primer on the steps, and I also use a brush painted sealing primer around the base there of the smoke box, so it'll be ready. I'm going to paint that gloss black as my plan. So here's the paint cans that I'm talking about, the Rust-Oleum high heat. I used that on my boiler for my Allen Mogul, and it worked out great. And there's the automotive priming sealer, which I used the self-etching primer yesterday on all the brass parts, and then the priming sealer, and then the high heat. So next is the top coat. I'm going to use gloss dark hunter green for most of the body, some gloss black for the running boards, and gloss, I think this is called Sunrise Red, it's the same color I used on the bumper. Yeah, Sunrise Red for the top of the cab. That's my plan. I need to get some white or ivory for inside the cab. But there we have it. Okay, the beginning of day 3 of the painting. There's the cab roof done in the Sunrise Red. I've got the running boards and the gloss black, and I'll put another coat of the high heat on the smoke box. So we'll let all this sit in the sun for at least an hour before we move them, and I'll get ready to put the green on all the things that are going to be green. Thought I'd capture the prep work for the color coat. So this is the piece of brass that has 2 coats of self-etching primer and 2 coats of primer sealer on it, which I've sanded down with 400 grit in between, 400 or 500 grit, I forget. But now I'm going at it again before the color goes on with some 500 grit wet or dry paper. I'm just doing it dry and very lightly just to get it smooth, and then I finish with this ultra-fine Scotch-Brite just to get in all the little nooks and crannies, and then I use the tack rag here to pick up any dust, and then I carry it out and let it sit in the sun and where it's waiting to paint.
There's the parts after the second coat of the deep green. Looks pretty nice. Now I'll let these sit for an hour, and I'll take in most of it. I gotta turn those over and paint the other side.
If you're wondering about the smoke box saddle, I primed it last night, and then tonight I painted it, or today I painted it with some semi-gloss black. I haven't even cleaned it up yet, but I also painted the top of the oil reservoir. You can see that that made it disappear. And I probably will make eventually a filler plate to go in here, but I wanted to keep it open for now so I can see and make sure that the mechanism is engaging there on the ratchet mechanism on the oil pump. So there is the smoke box saddle, and here's the paint. It's the Rust-Oleum semi-gloss black, and I just used a little paintbrush to get that small detail in there.
Yeah, I've got 2 coats of this on everything. This is my first time using one of these the adjustable spray nozzle, and I really like it. Let me show you. I did the initial coating with number 2, the standard setting, and then number 3 is like the fine spray. Let me show you how nice that is. It's perfect for a model. So I wish I would have done the first coat with the fine spray. The standard setting, the number 2 setting, it has a lot of force, and I had shaken the can up real well, and I got a couple of splatters and sputters at first. Nothing that really impacted the finish, but just disconcerting nonetheless. So there's 2 coats on the hatch covers there, and 3 coats total on the tanks, because I noticed a couple of little spots that I had missed. So I'm going to let this thing let these sit out here for an hour and dry, and then I'll take them inside as well. I really like that color.
Alright, now everything's dried for a couple of days, but I noticed when I was taking the tape off of the left-hand tank yesterday, I didn't get exactly the finish that I was looking for. This is the right-hand tank, and you can see, hopefully you can see, most of it is a great gloss finish, but there's this section up here that's just a little hazy, and I think I know why. I think it's because I used that light spray and I didn't do a very nice job. I didn't ensure that I got adequate coverage. So what I'm going to do is touch these tanks up here. The left one I've sanded it down again with 500 grit sandpaper. Mind you, this is after it's dried for a couple of days, and then I've run the scuffing pad over it, and I just touched on it with the tack rag to pick up the excess dust. So I'm going to lay these on their side like this and shoot the paint down so it's, you know, laying flat basically. Hopefully it'll give it a better coat. I really want it to have that nice gloss coat with no gaps in it, kind of like this rear portion came out. A couple of final steps for the painting. I wanted to paint the inside of the cab an antique white color, so I found this outdoor acrylic enamel at Michael's of all places, and I don't know how well it'll work, but it's the right color, it looks good, and seems to be pretty tough so far. So I've brush painted that on. This is the second coat on the inside pieces of the cab, and now it's drying. Hopefully it'll lay down a little smoother, not quite as smooth as a Keith Appleton paint job, but pretty nice still, and it looks great. Nice contrasting color to the dark hunter green. Also, I found some little British Railway vintage logo decals on eBay, and so I'm cutting them out with an X-Acto knife. We'll see how those look on the tanks. Little change of venue for you. I brought all the Tich chassis and all the parts inside my garage in my house, and I'm going to let these painted parts just sit here for whatever it is the next week or two while I finish the assembly on the boiler, cleaning the boiler, and then reassembling it. So I thought it'd be nice to have these things all just, the paint can kind of cure on its own here. So here we are with the smoke box cover, the chimney. I think that came out pretty nice. This is all done in that high heat paint. And then the cylinder covers, I painted them with the dark forest green as well. The boiler jacket, really nice, really happy with that finish. The tanks, of course, they're in the dark forest green, and the tank covers on either side. And then the running boards in the gloss black. the cab in the dark forest green with the antique white interior, and then the roof with the red and antique white, the rear collier, coal pan, and floor pan, they're black and a forest green, of course. And on a little note, little builder's note, the Altoid tins are not just being used, they are being used as props for the holding the pieces up, but also they've got the appropriate parts, like this one here. This has got the window frames, it's got the handrails for the rear coal bunker, and a lot of other fasteners that are needed. So that's my way of keeping things together, keeping them organized. So this will all just stay in here and dry, and let the paint cure for a couple of weeks, whatever it takes, while I put the boiler together. So I guess this will be my last segment. Oh, I'm sorry. Only other thing I need to do, I want to put some British Railway stickers on the sides, on the tanks, but this one here, I was getting ready to use it. The problem is it's got that white background, and I don't think that'll look really good, so I'm going to see if I can get some clear ones. I see Blackgates Engineering sells them. I also contacted somebody off of eBay to see if they can make me one that's a little bit larger than that. This would be an okay size, but it'd be nice to have it a little bit larger. But if any of my British, especially the British viewers, can recommend what's the best source, should I buy just from Blackgates or should I get from somebody else? Some of these, I think they call that the lion over the wheel logo. I really think that looks cool, and there's a page in the Tich book where it shows the locomotive with that kind of logo on it. So that's all, everything now. I'll wrap this up. This will be the last segment for this episode, and the rest of it I've got in the workshop. I've got the boiler. I'm going to clean that out, clean it and degrease it carefully, and then I'll start carefully assembling all of the regulator, the blower valve and tube, and the throttle pieces, all that stuff. I'll be busy doing that while this stuff stays out here and cures. So thanks everybody, I appreciate you watching, being along for the journey. Please give me a thumbs up, ask any questions that you might have, and I will keep you posted. Look for the next one on the assembly of the boiler. Thank you.